Morning, everyone. So we are back again. Uh, I hope that you are safe and sound. I know that last week was pretty crazy for all of us. It took me a while to get back online myself, so I can only imagine what you may have dealt with last week. If you need to talk to someone, I highly implore you to talk to the UNT Counseling Center, who has been specially assigned the role of helping you talk through some of the things that you may have experienced last week with the major Texas blackout. We're kind of in this unique space right now where our state is crashing headlong into both the privatization of our electric grid as well as the realities of climate change. And so um, there is reason to believe that more things like that will happen in Texas over the next 20 years or so. And so do be safe. I know last week was quite a shock for all of us, but hopefully this is a brand new week. Hopefully it is just a very quiet, boring week where you can just sit and get work done. So that's what the goal is, and that's what the wishes are. In addition, we still have COVID-19, as well as at this point, 5 to 6 different variants of it in the state and in the country. So this is your weekly reminder to continue to mask up, continue to socially distance. There is a concept called pandemic fatigue, right? Quite simply put, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of living in a world that's been altered by a pandemic that we seemingly can't get under control, right? So we're all experiencing it. It's taken me a few different times to record this lecture just because I've been tired of being stuck here in my apartment and wanting to go out and see people and experience life like a normal way. And for all of you young folks watching this video, I can imagine that need and that desire is even triple what mine is. So, but we are still in the midst of this. So do continue to have patience with yourselves, have patience with others. Do continue to be wise, and do continue to protect yourselves as we move forward. This picture here is very interesting, right? Because there's two things here that are going on. The first thing is clearly this is in a pre-COVID-19 world, right? If you look carefully at the photo, you'll see that the majority of individuals in the photo are twins. Stare at it, you can start to see, right? They're wearing the same clothes, have the same hairstyles, they look exactly the same. The majority are identical twins. And there's a few fraternal ones thrown in as well, but the majority are identical. So it's a gathering of twins. So the goal for this week here is to talk a little bit about this idea of genetics and heredity. So we're moving off the scientific method, and we're just going to take a deep dive into each of these states as quickly and as comprehensively as we can. So we are finally getting into the bio part, biopsychology, right? So we're going to only touch upon these topics, and then hopefully they gain your interest to the extent that you will continue on and learn more about them in depth the further on you get into the major or the minor. So today we're talking a little bit about genes, evolution, and the environment. And hopefully by the end of this chapter, you'll get some sort of basic understanding of how genes and environment interact together to make you the you that you are. Now, I got to plug my developmental psychology class. So if you haven't signed up for that, please do try to take that next semester or spring of next year. We delve into it a little bit more in depth about how genes and environment interact. But the basic idea is that your genes don't exist in a vacuum, okay? Yes, you have genetic material which expresses itself in a certain way. However, how that material expresses itself is both limited and defined by the environment that your genes are in. How you look today here in Texas is different from how you would look if you were born in Nigeria, which is different from how you would look if you were born in the Arctic. Okay. Your genes would express in a different way. And so that's a really powerful relationship. And it's a really powerful interaction to think about your genes being affected by the environment around you, but also the environment has power to inherently affect the ways in which your genes are expressing themselves. And evolution comes into play as well too, because your genes are constantly adapting so that you can survive at all costs, and that your species survives at all costs. And so your genes are these living things that interact with the environment that's telling them over time what to do in order to survive. So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit of that today, enough to where we can have these conversations that are really important. For this week, please read and continue reading chapter 3 in your book. There is a very short and brief documentary that I've uploaded to the module as well that I want you to look at. It's a very brief 20, 30-minute view into genes and genetic structures. It'll help to supplement the material both in the book and on this presentation. Unlocking the secrets of genes. So, what are behavioral genetics? Behavioral genetics are these interdisciplinary fields of study that are concerned with genetic contributions to individual differences in behavior and personality. In other words, how does the expression of our genes influence and impact the ways in which we express our outward behavior? There is an interaction there. If your genes express in one way, you might do one set of actions. If your genes express in another way, you might do another set of actions. So your gene behavior interaction then is important, because if we can study the genes that you have, it tells us something about the behaviors you're likely to exhibit. So when we look at the human genome, there are certain questions that we need to ask, right? Why are proteins important? What are genes? What does chemical coding do? What does the genome structure contain? Where are the actual genome structures located? And what is it that they actually do? What is it that the genome is actually doing, right? And so when we talk about this idea of what are genes, genes are these basic units of heredity, right? Basic, you can't break them down really too much further, but they're basic units of heredity that sort of tell the uh, that sort of dictate how your body is going to express itself. As far as where are they located, well, that question is going to be on the chromosomal structure. So chromosomes then will tell you where that's located at, where that is. Now, what do they do? Specify the structure of the protein. Now, this is very important because the structure of the protein dictates the formation of the genes. The genes, you remember, dictate the behaviors that you express. So the structure of the protein is very key and very important in understanding how you come to be who you are. Now, what does the structure of the proteins contain? Sequence of 4 bases in your DNA. The A, T, C, G bases that constitute a chemical coding. That chemical coding is important in order to specify the structure of the proteins, right? The proteins then located on the chromosomes, and then that dictates the gene structure, which determines what you do. Now, what does this chemical code to? To determine the synthesis of a particular protein. If we can determine how to formulate a particular protein structure, then the protein will combine with other proteins in specific ways, which will determine specific DNA structures. Why are these proteins altogether important? Because they affect virtually every aspect of the body, structurally and chemically. Right? The reason we care about how the proteins are constructed are because that's the first step in determining what genes are going to be created and how they're going to be expressed. So when we look at genes and chromosomes, right, you have to think about the formation of a cell. Within the cell is the cell nucleus, and the nucleus has chromosomes which contain specific genes. And those specific chromosomes then are composed of DNA. Remember the four DNA structures that we just spoke about, A, T, C, and G, right? So that DNA then composes the chromosomes, and the chromosomes are inside the cell nucleus. Now, the DNA structure is formed in a double helix type structure, right? It's a very cool, very unique structure. One of the best things you can do is go on YouTube and look up 3D double helix DNA models. They're really pretty fascinating. And when we get back to a place where we can meet in real life, you can be able to see and touch and hopefully have the real life models. And you can just see how complex a structure the DNA double helix is. This DNA double helix strand is one of the most powerful structures in the entire universe. And you can see it just in its composition, how it's formulated. Now, when we talk about the human genome, right, that's something that's gained a lot of popularity over the last few years. It was a major government funded study to map the human genome some years ago. I feel like it was in the early 2000s, end of the 1990s. And through this major project, researchers were able to determine that the sequence of nearly all 3 billion bases of DNA, that would be all your A's, all your C's, all your T's, and all your G's, um, and also to figure out how the genes were arranged specifically on the chromosomes. So when we talk about studying genetic material, researchers identify genes by using new technologies that survey many DNA elements at once. Additionally, we use linkage studies and genetic markers. You might think of genetic markers in terms of like driving on a highway. You have your mile markers, right? You know, near mile marker 31, there will be an exit which puts you in Denton. But if you get off at mile marker 16, right, then you'll take an exit, which will put you on the highway to get you to Dallas. So when we talk about genetic markers, we can mark certain sequences in the genome. And by marking certain sequences, we know exactly how the gene expression is going to go. It can also identify certain markers, certain identifiers, for lack of a better word, which can tell us what type of health issues might exist. Are there certain markers for cancer? Are there certain markers for diabetes? Are there certain markers for obesity? Are there certain markers for sickle cell anemia, right? So if we know what these markers are, we know where on the highway to get off, and we know what to expect once we do. And then, of course, one of the areas that I'm most interested in is this idea of linking genes to the actual behavior, right? We identify a gene, it's not, and when we identify a gene, it's not the end of the process. One of the reasons is researchers do not automatically know its role in physical or psychological functioning. Most human traits are influenced by more than one gene pair. So typically, there's more than one influence on the gene pair, which will influence how that gene expresses, which in turn then experiences the behaviors that we see of the individuals. So there's all types of influences then on the genome, which affects how we function. Epigenetics is a topic you will get into heavily in developmental. So if you have not taken developmental psychology, again, I plug that class. It fits very much so with this one here. When we talk about epigenetics, we're really sort of talking about um, stable changes that occur in gene expressions, right? And these stable changes that occur for a variety of reasons over time, right? And that's something that should have been added to this section. Stable changes that occur in gene expression over time. They're a direct result of influences from behavior, from neuroactivity, from the environment, from the gene itself, right? Without any change in the sequence of bases in the gene's DNA. So the gene's DNA itself did not change, but how the gene interacted with neurons, how the gene interacted with the environment, how the gene interacts to influence behavior. Those things did change. And the study of those changes is called epigenetics. Epigenetics, sort of the outside influences and causes of the genetic expressions and functions that we see within the human genome. So back to this photo, right? Again, keep in mind how many different unique pairs of twins there are. This right here is an amazing, it's absolutely an amazing photo just because of having that many twins, having that many um, um, statistical, unique, beautiful expressions of genes in one place, expressing different people, different cultures, different ethnicities, different beliefs. It's absolutely marvelous when you think about it. So, evolutionary psychology. And I don't know if we get into that much in this class. If we don't, we should. And I'm going to try to see that we do. But essentially, evolutionary psychology is this emphasis on evolutionary mechanisms that explain human commonalities in social practices, perception, emotional responses, and other areas of behavior. In other words, evolutionary psychology is focused on how we as human beings have evolved to survive over years and years of existence, and why we do the things that we do in order to continue to promote our survival. There's things that we do consciously, there's things that we do unconsciously. If we understand why we're doing those things, that will help us once we begin to try to figure out the causes of human existence. So obviously, evolution and natural selection, right? So there's this change in gene frequency within a population over many generations. This mechanism is how we understand the characteristics of a population and the ways that they change. And additionally, changes occur mainly due to either mutations or errors, which occur when a DNA sequence is being copied, or due to natural selection, right? Where a certain amount of the population has genes that are selected for some type of improvement or some type of difference from what the rest of the population is experiencing. Now, should that improvement promote survival, what happens is that organism survives and passes those genes on, and those who didn't have that organism, or excuse me, those who didn't have that gene die out. Over many generations, what happens is that those individuals who have the gene that helps them to survive are now living, and there's many of them. Those who didn't, they die out. All right, so continuing on, right? The evolutionary process in which individuals with genetically influenced traits are adaptive to a particular environment tend to do two things, which I just spoke about: survive and reproduce, like little bunny rabbits, right? The more you reproduce, the more that gene is now out in the population, the more of those members of the species are prevalent, the more they begin to mate more other individuals who have that gene, and they continue on until they survive in greater numbers and overtake those who don't have the adaptive trait. Their traits become more common in the population as time goes on. So always continue to think about time as just outside influence that's affecting these expressions. Right. So natural selection allows animals to survive because they adapt to the environment, right? So an example might be the pocket mice, who are sandy colored and well camouflaged against light colored rocks, as opposed to those mice that are not, who stand out. If you're camouflaged against uh, the rocks, you're less likely for some snake to come along and eat you. So therefore, people who are camouflaged like you survive. If you're not camouflaged, you stand out, and guess what happens? You're minding your business on the rock, and you turn around and you're eaten. So not a good way to go, not a good way to end this journey, right? So those who have the camouflage gene survive, those who didn't die out. Now, what is the human mind? Now, according to evolutionary psychologists, it is not a computer essentially waiting for us to program, right? You are watching this most likely on the computer, unless you're someone who is a tech geek like I am, and you've attached your computer to your television and you're watching my big head on your television, right? Now, evolutionary psychologists don't like this idea that the human mind is compared to a computer and it's just waiting for you to upload programs and upload coding and tell it what to do. According to evolutionary psychologists, the human mind is made up of these quote unquote mental modules, right? These mental modules are kind of like the modules that you have in your Canvas site. Each module is designed for a different task. Each module is designed to bring you to a different um, um, understanding of how the world works. Each module is designed to help you survive and to teach you a lesson. So each of your mental modules then help you to handle specific survival problems. You have a module for what to do when food is scarce. You have a module for what to do if you're walking down the street and you see a lion running towards you. You have a module for what to do if a hailstorm breaks out. And all these modules combine together to help you to survive life. So, innate human characteristics are these characteristics that you come into the world with. And we're talking about innateness. We're talking about things that are already in you when you arrive here. So you think about infant reflexes, right? You tickle an infant's foot, it kind of curls up a little bit. You put your hand in the infant's, you put your finger in the infant's hand, they automatically grab it, right? So that's a survival technique, right? Interest in novelty, so seeing things that are new. Why? Because you get to explore the world around you. And the more you explore, the more you learn it. The more you learn the world around you, according to some developmental theorists, the more you can shape that world. And the safer the world becomes because you can see new threats and understand things that are not familiar. A desire to explore and manipulate things goes a lot along with that, right? The more you touch things, the more tactile you become, the more you manipulate, the more you realize you can have a direct impact on the environment that you're in. An impulse to play and fool around. Play is good. Play is very good. And play promotes social interaction. Yet it promotes social growth. It promotes peer group development. It promotes growth of neurons in the mind. So play is very, very good. It teaches you what tools you can use and how to use them. It teaches you to have fun. It can help simulate real world experiences. So play is absolutely important. I'm someone who likes to play a lot, so that's why I'm belittling this point, right? But play is absolutely important to you and to the development of children. And then basic cognitive abilities, right? So figuring out basic uh, answers to problems that present themselves, right? So if you are wanting food that's on a high counter, right? Then eventually you figure out how you need to stack things in order to climb them to reach that high counter, right? So problem solving, figuring out things like opening up doors, figuring out how to answer complex issues. These things are important. These basic cognitive abilities are important because, quite simply put, you're less likely to survive if you're stupid. If you're stupid, you're more likely to die an earlier death. Now, I'm using the word stupid here, half jokingly, right? Because it's very few people who are actually really stupid. So we're using it half jokingly here to provide a gross example. But the people who survive in this life are the ones who are smart. A stupid child, they're not really a stupid child, children, but a stupid child or a child without these basic cognitive abilities, right, is going to expose themselves to a lot of danger. A child developing cognitive abilities appropriately and at the developmental points that they should be developing them is more likely to survive, more likely to interpret danger and anticipate danger, and more likely to know what to do once danger is there. So basic cognitive abilities are absolutely necessary to survive. To give you another point of this, you see this in human adults. What happens when someone drinks a lot of alcohol? They begin to experience cognitive deficits. What happens? They make terrible mistakes. One of the number one causes of death in individuals who are intoxicated are falls. Why does that happen? Because you've lost your cognitive abilities. You think, gee, I can jump from this building to the next one because I'm Batman. You make the jump, you don't make it across, you fall down, you maim yourself, seriously break a couple of limbs, or you die. Or you overestimate your ability to drive home, you get behind the wheel of a car, and then you kill yourself or somebody else. So basic cognitive abilities are a survival mechanism so that you live in this world successfully and that you survive it. So as you can see, these are examples of world building and playing with tools. And also keep in mind too, this is not species specific, right? It's not only human beings who are learning how to have basic cognitive abilities grow and expand. It's not just human beings who have an interest in novelty. It's not just human beings who want to play and fool around. It's not just human beings who want to explore and manipulate, right? So this goes across species. The more you play, the more you manipulate, the more you can learn about the world around you, the better you are to understand it and survive. And the more you play with things and explore the world around you, what happens inside your brain? Neuronal growth. Your neurons grow more because your brain is stimulated with the environment that you're in. There have been so many studies that show that if you're in an environment and you're not playing with anything and you're not manipulating it, the neuronal growth pattern halts sometimes, and some neurons you actually lose. So this is important for building you up in the world that you are in. For those of you who are parents, for those of you who wish to become parents, one of the things that you're really going to want to do is have an environment that is mentally stimulating to the child. Excuse me. All right. That's the end of this first part. So I'm trying to break this up because this is a fairly long lecture series. So this is the end of part one. We're going to come back here in a few moments to part two. We're going to continue talking. So go take a break, take some notes, read in your books, and then come on back for part two.